This is Mad Jack, this time bringing you part 3 of my arena build guide, which is all about building traps. Here we're going to be building the kind of traps that we control directly from our control station, that we switch on when we want them, along with the type of traps that are just going to be automatically activated by enemies passing through them. So let's just take a quick look at both. Here we've got switched activated traps, and then over here we've got the sort of traps that are going to be activated by enemies passing through. I call these sorts of traps softeners, as this one here is set up to soften up Yaoguais as they enter the cage. So we'll release our Yaoguais, they'll come through here, activate this switch to set off all these traps, so that the Yaoguais will be a bit softened up by the time they come into this main area to fight off everything else. And then I've done a similar thing here with the Deathclaws. So once the Deathclaws come out of their cages here, they're going to activate this switch and set off this series of defense here, which also has a number of spotlights all running around it, just to add a bit more of a spectacle to the Deathclaws coming out, which, you know, is quite a big part of the arena, unleashing this many Deathclaws at once. But we're going to go over how to set up these traps a bit later on in the video. To start with, we're just going to go over the more simple traps that follow the same principles as the cages and the powered doors that we set up earlier. So first of all, let's just take a look at probably the simplest trap we have set up here, the Tesla traps, where here what we've done is we've just linked all our traps together, linked all the Tesla traps together, sent the power up to the roof, and then now, of course, because they're separated here by this door, we're going to have to run them up to the roof twice. So they're both being run up to the roof, connected to each other, then run along the ceiling, all the way along the ceiling, down to here, following along the line, finally ending on the switch. Now here, slightly differently to how we've set up the cages and the doors, before you connect the power to the mains power supply here on the power pylon, make sure that you've switched the switch off. So say this is the switch we're going to set up, switch it off, and then connect it to the mains power pylon. If you don't do this, the trap's all just going to activate immediately, which is a little bit irritating, because then you're going to have to go and repair everything, and you just don't want to be doing that. So same again, let's have a look at another simple trap set up here with the radiation traps. Exactly the same principles we just did with the Tesla traps. They're all connected along in a line, power goes up to the roof, connect the bridge of the two sections, and then take it along all the way down to the switch, turn the switch off, ending in the power pylon. So these are two very simple traps that we've set up. Now let's go to one that's a little bit more complicated to set up. Here with the saw blade traps, I've done something quite interesting, but same thing again to start with. Well, as the saw blades can't be powered along the floor, you're going to have to send the power up to the ceiling 4 times. So here, power sent up to the ceiling. From this one, power up to the ceiling. Same again here, power up to the ceiling, following along a nice long line, where here, what we've got here is an interval switch, just to add a bit more customization to the way in which these saw blade traps work, but I'll go over how we've set up the terminal in a second. But before you do that, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to take the power line that you run along the ceiling, then you're going to need to take the power directly down to the interval switch, and then back up to the ceiling to run along the line. If you don't set it up exactly like this, the power is just going to bypass the interval switch and it's not going to work, and you're just going to find yourself really confused by it later on. So make sure you set it up exactly like this. Power goes down from the ceiling to the interval switch, back up before it follows along in the power line. Now if we take a quick look at how this works and the way I've set this up, let's come over here. So saw blade traps, turn these on. I currently have them set up to 5 seconds on, 3 seconds off, and then they'll come back on again, just so that they're not too overpowered, as the saw blade traps do a serious amount of damage to enemies, a surprising amount more so than anything else. So I want enemies to be able to run right up to here and not get completely annihilated. It's just to make it a bit more fair, and also just make it a bit more interesting at the same time. So, okay, once you have it all connected like that, your interval switch is just going to have automatic settings that are set to it. So to control the interval switch using your terminal, which I told you to set up earlier in an earlier part of the video, you're just going to go into the terminal, go to interval switch, and you're going to set the on time to however you want. I've got mine set to 5 seconds, and you're going to set your off time to however much you want. I've got mine set to 3 seconds, but you know, mix up how you want to do that. And then there you go, you've got an interval controlled spinning trap set up. So it's getting a little bit more complicated now, but let's move on to something else. Something else a bit more complicated than that. Actually, well, first of all, let's just go over these flame traps, which I've got set up here, which also follow a very simple principle, just like the Tesla traps and the radiation traps. Same thing, we're sending the power up the roof, we're bridging the gap, and then we're running the power along to its individual switch, which we all know how to do now. So that's easy enough to do. Something I should mention here that is really, really important. All you guys really need to understand if you're going to set up such complicated trap lines is you may notice here that all along the floor, wherever I've got any of my traps or anything, I have used no electric lighting. Now, electric lights will completely mess up your electrical circuits. They will destroy your electrical circuits. So if you're going to use electrical lights, only put them where they cannot interfere. You'll see here I've got electrical lights running down the top of the middle so that they cannot interfere with anything. But say I was to put an electrical light here or here, what would happen is when I activated one of my traps, it will activate all of them. Now, I have no idea why Bethesda has done this. It doesn't make any sense at all why an electrical light will transmit power to other nearby sources of electronics. I don't know of any lights that do that, like some crazy Tesla light, but it's completely insane, but that's what they've done. So if you're going to set up traps like this and you're going to have whole mazes of electronics along your ceilings, you simply just cannot use electrical lights. Just forget about electrical lights, other than ones that you've isolated far away from everything else. So these ones here running along the ceiling are far enough away from all the traps and anything on the ground that they're not going to interfere. But for example here, where I've even just got this this gunner's light, I initially wanted to set something up where I had pressure plates here, where if you stepped on the pressure plates, it would set off these, it would turn on these shotgun traps just above here, which is something I may still do later. But the reason I had to turn it off was just the fact that I had this gunner light here meant that when I stepped on this plate, the power would transmit from this to all these traps down here, all these traps down here, and it would set off a whole myriad of traps all at the same time, just because I've got an electrical light here. And it's completely insane that it's set up this way, but a big warning to you guys, be very, very careful with your electrical lights and how you're going to set this up. Now you may notice here, I've got some electrical lights set up, but the reason that these can work safely and not interfere with anything else is they are being powered from this mains power supply up here and have no power transmitters on this section at all. So this is just about far enough away that it doesn't interfere with these, but this is a very, very close to interfering. So be careful if you want to use electrical lights at all like I've done here. I've managed to just about use them in a way that they're not going to interfere, but it can be pretty difficult to do. Alright, so let's move on to some more complicated traps. Let's take a look here at these automated traps that I've set up for the Yao Guai. Now, to set up traps like this is a little bit confusing. Now, what I've also done here with this trap is I've used a delay on switch, but for the purpose here I've just disabled the delayed on switch at the terminal, but you can of course just reactivate it because it's all set up the same way. So what you're going to do first of all is you're going to put down your laser tripwire to begin with, just so you know where you want the region. And then what you're going to need to do to make this work correctly is you're going to need to connect all the traps that you want to put down to the tripwires first. Like, that needs to be the first connection of your electrical power. If you do it any other way, this is just not going to work. The tripwire is just going to be completely useless to you. So you're going to send all the power traps to the tripwire, and then from the tripwire, well, here, just to make it look a bit nicer, I've sent the power from the tripwire to this electrical conduit on the floor, which I've been able to clip quite nicely into the trap. And then we're then sending the power directly up the ceiling. We're here to here. And then from here we're sending the power down to the delayed on switch, back up again to here, where we're then sending the power to the mains power supply. Now these traps are of course different to the switched on off traps, that these always need to be powered. So as long as you set up your mains power supply like I did, and like we talked about in the earlier videos, isolating the mains power supply, running it down the middle, you won't have any problems setting this up. Obviously if you set up a completely different arena and done entirely your own thing, then you're going to have a lot of problems trying to set up something like this and it not interfering with everything else. So as long as you followed on with my earlier videos, you're going to have no problem at all doing this. So another thing I should mention is that obviously because these are separated in between two sides, I've just had to replicate the principle on both sides, where on this side I've run the power up and then bridged it in between the two with this middle section here, so that before it's hitting the interval switch and the power, the two sides are being bridged, power's running down, interval switch, back up to the mains power supply. So just to show you that working in operation, what I've done here is currently set to trigger on anything, just for the purpose of this video. But of course you're going to want it set to trigger on hostiles, so that you're not just accidentally setting it off all the time. But here, let's just show you this working. So we walk through, powers everything up nicely, walk through. So as you can imagine, the Yao guys will be coming through, and they're going to take a considerable amount of damage initially when they first enter this section. So they're going to be nicely softened up so that they're not going to overwhelm our gunners, raiders, mole rats and hounds, just to make the fight a bit fairer and elongate it all a bit. Now once you're done with these traps, these will just, because the spinning blade traps go on for a while, they're just going to go off continually on their own, unlike these traps which are one use. But once you're done with the trap and you want to reactivate it all, just come here to the laser tripwire, turn it off. I like to try and turn them off right in the corner. There you go, those are now back in place. And then you're going to need to repair all the individual parts to use it again the next time. There we go. So that's now all set up again nicely for when it's actually going to be used. Now, as I mentioned, of course, to set this up just to activate on hostiles only, all you're going to need to do is you need to go into the terminal, go to optical sensor, which is what they call the laser tripwire, and just set to trigger on hostile targets only. And that's that for this type of trap. Now, same again here. We've done exactly the same principle here on the Deathclaw softener, where once again all of the traps are connected directly to the laser tripwire. Where here I've also added a siren, just to add a bit more character to it, so that once the Deathclaws cross this threshold, we know they've crossed this threshold because sirens are going off, all traps are going off, and all these spotlights here are going to all light up as well. Now, this is set up in exactly the same way. You're just going to need to connect everything that you want to switch on by the tripwire to the tripwire first and foremost. Here with the sirens, something you're going to have to do is once you place them, they're going to automatically be off, as of course you're supposed to go over to a siren and activate it. So here you're just going to turn the sirens on and then connect them to the tripwire. Spotlights connected to the tripwire. All of our traps here connected to the tripwire. And then we're going to be taking our power. Well, here actually we've got the delayed on switch, which isn't actually set up correctly right now, so probably just ignore it. In the end I decided against the delayed on switch here, because initially what I was going to do was set it up so when the first Deathclaw crosses the threshold, it doesn't turn on. It's well, it doesn't turn on for 3 seconds, so that obviously this guy here, he's going to come through first and get through quickest. I kind of wanted to leave it for a little bit of time so that more of the Deathclaws can get through and then more can be damaged by it. But so if you wanted to do that, you would need to connect the delayed on switch to the laser tripwire, and then take your power supply up to the ceiling from the delayed on switch. I haven't quite set this up yet, and something I'm still messing around with, but for the moment we're taking the mains power directly up from the laser tripwire to the ceiling, running it along here nicely, connecting it up with the other side, and then we're bridging the two here, and then we're connecting it to our mains power supply here. So once again, let's just show you this all working nicely. You can see all this in effect. Sirens come on, lights come on, the whole thing lights up, all these shotgun traps are ready. Just a real nice warning that the Deathclaws are coming out, ready to wreck everything up. I think this is really quite a cool touch, and something you guys could have a lot of fun with, doing your own customization on how you want to set up these sort of softeners in your arena. But let's just turn that off because the sirens can get a little bit irritating. We need to turn off both sides. Actually, no, this side, well, this tripwire hasn't actually been activated, but I set it up so that they're all going to be bridged in between each other. As in, I set up the electronics, as you can see here, they're all connecting in between both sides, as I just wanted to set it up that way. But of course you wouldn't need to do that. Say you wanted it to only activate this side, then just simply don't bridge your electronics from both sections. If we just literally removed this cable here, then that wouldn't happen. And then lastly, we've just got some cosmetic traps that are obviously very easy to place, like these spike traps here. We've just placed all down the middle, no problem at all. And lastly, I guess one other trap setup that we've done here is we've set up these laser traps, laser turrets here. And then just like we did with the flame traps, the radiation traps and the Tesla traps, we've just sent the power directly up the ceiling. We've bridged the two, and then sent power straight back to the switch, and so on. Now, something you also might notice here that we've done. What are these guys doing? Oh, it's my temporary stairs are causing chaos, as we can see here. Bloody idiots. Like, this guy literally just got himself killed. Oh my god, Muppets. Alright, that's what happens when you put temporary stairs in place. Alright, okay, so wait, back to what we were talking about. You'll notice here we've got some powered speakers set up. For the moment, just ignore those. In part 4 of the video, we're going to be doing advanced electronics, custom electronics setup, where we're going to be doing some really fun options with the powered speakers, with the light boxes, and a few other options just to add some real further customization to things. Like something I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the light boxes and speakers so that once you cross a certain threshold, a number of lights will come on, and the speakers will all play certain sounds. We can play out like a certain song, almost like a Mary Had a Little Lamb, like, for example, just once you cross a certain section. But we're going to go over that more in part 4. For now, I hope you follow that all closely and you understand everything that I've done here. And as I pointed out, do not use electrical lights. Be fucking careful with electrical lights, and you shouldn't have any major problems. But like before, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments section below, and I'll happily answer anything that you guys are struggling with. One other thing before I go, here with all the extremely covered electrical conduits that we've got going on here, just try and keep them as neat and tidy as you can. Like here, you see I'm connecting them all up like this to try and make them as neat as I can. It's going to be quite hard to keep them that neat as we go, but just do the best you can to keep everything neat, because this isn't even all the electronics that we're going to set up. If we take a look at the switches here, we've still got quite a few more switches left of things we're going to add, so try and keep everything as neat as you can, otherwise it's just going to get too difficult for you to see what's going on as we get later on. But yeah, that covers it for part 3 of traps. And yeah, as I said, any questions, ask me in the comment section below, and if you're all good, look out for part 4 coming shortly. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.